Men experience these mental health problems much differently. And one of the biggest differences is that aggression and anger plays a larger role in us than it does in women. My name is David Levine. I am a pediatrician in New Jersey in the United States. I went to Rutgers College for my undergrad. I went to NYU for medical school, and I did my residency in pediatrics at Yale New Haven Hospital. I, like many other fathers, was excited for the birth of my children. I have 2 children, but I was not expecting what happened after the birth of my first child, when I experienced what I did not realize at the time and only realized afterwards was some rather extreme postpartum depression and anxiety. Upon realizing that and getting in touch with people in a field that previously I knew very little about other than the maternal side, I became involved in trying to increase awareness of postpartum mental health problems in men, and subsequently became a board member of Postpartum Support International. We use a tool called the Edinburgh Depression Scale, most of us do, which is a validated tool to determine whether a person may be suffering from some postpartum mental health stresses. It is given routinely to new mothers at the time of birth, while they're in the hospital, and oftentimes in their OBGYN follow-up visits and in some pediatric visits. Unfortunately, though, we oftentimes will miss the other parent. Now, sometimes that other parent is another female, but oftentimes it is still a male. And it turns out that although roughly 1 in 5 women will experience some postpartum depression or anxiety, it's estimated that around 1 in 10 men will do the same. And it's probably closer to the women's rates, only there's not enough research to verify the exact prevalence. But we oftentimes forget the father's even there, and they're going through something just as profound as the mother. And it is to the detriment of the family and to society when we ignore the other parent. Oftentimes the concerns are the health of the baby and the health of the mother. Sometimes the big questions are, when can we have sex again? And these are all important questions. But most fathers just want to know, like, men are, we tend to be very goal driven. We like to know what our roles are. And oftentimes when a new baby is born, we don't know what our role is, because if our wife is breastfeeding, we're not feeding. We can change the diapers, but oftentimes, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in America, very few men get any paternity leave. They might be able to take a week or 2, but they don't get much time off. So they never really gain a comfort in caring for the baby. So they end up finding themselves trying to take care of the mother while also continuing their job of bringing home, bringing in the income and doing whatever their roles were beforehand, which, depending on where you are in America and the culture that you're dealing with, those fathers could be very hands-on, or in some cases they could be very hands-off. But we like to be able to feel like we're doing something, and sometimes we're really not sure what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be the provider. We're supposed to be the rock for our spouses. And so we think more about those things than we necessarily do even the baby in the very beginning. We just assume that the mother will take care of all that stuff because, and again, I speak for a certain generation of fathers that, many of us did not have, it's not that we didn't have present fathers, but we had fathers of a generation that felt like, well, there were male roles and there are female roles. And although that is somewhat true, many, aside from the nursing part, a father can do a lot of the same things that the mother can do. It's just that women are socialized to be ready for this moment to some degree. But men are not. Men are, you know, we are taught, oh, the baby comes, that's our job. You know, you get back to the earning stuff, and you get the food in, and you clean, you arrange all these things. But the child is almost secondary, or at least was for maybe our parents' generation. But that's rapidly shifting for various reasons. One of the biggest is women and men now work. There's many dual income families, and men have to be able to provide more parenting than we did before. Many of us genuinely want to, but we had no role models for that. We didn't come from families where fathers could do that, and we therefore we don't have our own fathers to oftentimes say, all right, so this is how you're going to do this when the baby comes. Like, most of our fathers, my father especially, was like, all right, so I have no idea. You know, my father didn't change diapers. My father really didn't feed me. So he was not going to be of any he wasn't going to be able to help me to figure out what I was supposed to do when I became a father.
That's true. That's true. And you know, the important point that you raised earlier is that if there's no paternity leave, there's not much space and opportunity for you to even learn.
Yeah, I was very lucky in that in the state of New Jersey, I was allowed to take paternity leave. I took a month off when my first child was born. So my wife was home for the first 3 months. I took the 4th month. And it was actually during that time that I finally started to feel like I had figured out what to do. I became confident, and with confidence, you can weather a lot more of the storms of parenting, because now you feel like, all right, I know what that crying means, or I know how to change that diaper, and I know the baby's cues that you can't know when you leave at 7 o'clock in the morning, you come home at 6 o'clock at night, and you left when the baby was just getting up, and you got home when the baby was ready to go back to sleep, ready to go to bed. So most people think of postpartum depression and anxiety in the woman. So tearfulness, fears about the child being sick, isolation, that kind of stuff. Men experience these mental health problems much differently. And one of the biggest differences is that aggression and anger plays a larger role in us than it does in women. We still can isolate, but ours could be much more subtle. We work a little bit later. We take more meetings. We work on weekends. We go into our man cave, and we kind of we do more of the things that we might have been doing before. But that also goes to, we might drink a little bit more. We could smoke a little bit more. We could eat a little bit more. We go big. But most importantly, it's the anger. And I experienced that, especially when with both of my children, and I didn't realize it. I did not know that that's what I would have been looking out for, the things that I thought about in women. And one of the things that the mental health field has realized is that, unlike more traditional medical problems, like in general, pneumonia, heart attacks, strokes, cancers, they tend to look the same in both genders. But mental health can look very different. And when you come from a, sadly, female-centric point of view, which is unfortunately the heart of many mental health understandings, you know, hysteria does come from hysterectomy, uterus, they all come together. You miss the fact that many men do not experience it that way. So aggression is very important, and anger. When my son was born, I was very angry at him. I felt that he did not love me. I felt that he was actually, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous that a 2-week-old could intentionally just cry for daddy, but I felt like he didn't love, I felt very rejected by him. And I didn't take out physical aggression, but I was very verbally aggressive towards my son. I would say very mean-spirited and nasty things to my wife about him and how he was, and what he was going to mean for our marriage. When my second child was born, which was 4 years after the first, when I was already very aware of what had happened the first time and was already starting to speak more about it, my verbal aggressiveness was then taken out on my wife. because I now blamed her for forcing me to have another child and knowing exactly what was going to happen. So I still was angry at the child, but I was very, very angry at my wife. And that was how it came out. And that is very common. So when you were asked about domestic violence, maybe they didn't know that that's what they were referring to, but domestic violence, unfortunately, does increase in the postpartum period, even in households where there was no previous domestic violence. And it has to do with the stress that the father is under and the, again, societal ways in which a man is allowed to express themselves emotionally tend to be in the aggressive category. It's one of the it's one of the ways that we understand ourselves, and it's one of the ways that society understands us. Rarely would see that in the woman, but you will see that a lot in the man. So the isolation, the increases in some of our worst tendencies, and the verbal or, unfortunately, physical aggressiveness that can come as we sink deeper and deeper into our depression. You are worried about how your spouse is going to react. Because, and I say this from, again, my own experience, I was worried, and I was wrong to worry about this because that's not who my wife is. But I was worried that she would think less of me as a man. That if I cried or if I told her how much doubts I was having, that she would wonder if she married the right person. So if I went the aggressive route, then that's more of a male route. So she'll at least know I'm still a guy. Because I'm getting angry and I'm using a lot of naughty words, but she'll at least know that I'm still me. And that was silly. That was ridiculous. And most women, I think, welcome that openness from their spouse. They love to see that. They want to delve into that because that's what builds a stronger relationship. Yet we sometimes, meaning us men, put up that blockade because that's too emotionally naked. We're fine being physically naked, but emotionally naked, we are not cool with that. Well, of course, there's a big difference between knowing what's happening and acting on what's happening. I knew I had a strong inkling of what was going on with me almost a month before I took action. So what's most important for all new parents is that they need to know that these things are possible in either gender, and they need to feel free to express to the other parent that they feel that something is wrong, and to follow up on their hunches, not in an aggressive way, but if it's a husband to a wife or a wife to a husband, if they see that something's going on, it's talking about it, it's bringing it up when they see their physician. If the father has a physician, it's trying to get them to talk about it to them. But sometimes what it actually amounts to is the wife saying, I'm making an appointment, you're coming with me. Because a lot of times the man will not follow through.
They won't. And, it is, I don't want to generalize, but I am going to. A lot of men really don't like to seek help, and they don't like to talk about their feelings and, go to mental health professionals. They think, oh, it means I'm a psycho, or, I don't have a handle on my emotions, and I am, I'm the man, I've got it together. So what can you do in that scenario? So how can you convince yourself or your partner, you really let's reach out and let's get help? How can we enable that a bit better?
So on a microscopic level, it's educating the parents either not only prepartum, but also when they're in the hospital and afterwards, that this is a real thing. This can happen to both of you. So you put it out there from the very beginning that when you come to, when this that there should be no shame in this. That at least like when I see parents in the office the first time, I always tell them what I've gone through, and I tell them that you're no good to me if you're falling apart, and you're no good to yourselves if you're not being honest.
Yeah.
So I think on the micro level, it's acknowledging that it's a possibility and trying to destigmatize it in that moment. And then with screening at each of the first several visits in the first 6 months, it's also, if something comes up or if you get a hit, it's talking to the parent, in this case the father, and saying, so how are things going? Let's talk a little bit more about it. On a macro level, though, it's society destigmatizing mental health and getting away from these antiquated notions that men are not capable of doing these things. It's educating parents when they have young boys in engendering in these children the ability to speak about their feelings and their emotions. And that way, if you can get a child to do that, and then they can do that in their teen years, they will become a man that knows how to do these things. And they don't have to learn it on the fly, as I did and as many men have to do. It's always like, I'm a pediatrician, everything is prevention. If you teach these things early on, they become lesser problems later when they're older. If you teach somebody to eat the right way and exercise, you try to stave off obesity, high blood pressure, heart attacks, and all the vascular disease that you can get. It's no different. It's just that too many societies view mental health as being a minor problem or an unspeakable problem, and it is to all of their detriment. And if nothing else, we know from the way things are going in many parts of the world, men that do not know how to talk about how they're feeling and are emotionally closed off do a large amount of damage to everybody around them. The biggest resource is the organization that I work with. They're called Postpartum Support International. It's www.postpartum.net. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. On our website, there is an entire page devoted to men. It's on the front page. You can click on information for fathers. There are links there to online chats, local help in your community. So your one-stop shop is that website. Oftentimes, many doctors in the community do not know much about the mental health resources, although some states are more active than others, and have websites for the state that have information for parents. It's mostly geared towards women, but sometimes you'll find information on men. And also there's a lot of good fathers websites out there now. Fatherly is one, and there's many others that have popped up in the last 10 years that many have articles regarding this and are much more upfront about how fathers feel and trying to work to destigmatize the struggles. Yes, there's always going to be the bro sites where it's all fun and, jokes and stuff, but within there you can find scholarly articles and real news articles for and about fathers going through postpartum mental health challenges and just what it's like to be a new dad. That's not just about the fun parts, but about some of the hard work that goes into it too. What's on the other side is counseling, either in the form of group sessions or individual sessions. Postpartum Support International has active groups in most of the United States and many places in Europe, Middle East, Africa, I believe Australia as well. And there's local resources that you can link to. There's even toll-free numbers to call to speak with volunteers who can also try to help put you in touch with either board members or people that are in your area that will be able to help. Medicine plays some role, but for the most part, that's relegated more for people who have had histories with depression or anxiety, or the therapy is not working. But most of this is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the standard for most anxiety and depression treatment. And as long as the father is committed to it and open to it, it can work very, very well. I did cognitive behavioral therapy for probably about 3 months with my first child and a little bit less with my second child, just because the second time around I was much more aware of what was happening And I feel like I was able to pull myself out of it. Whereas the first time by the time I got help, I was so deep into it that I needed help pulling myself out. So by and large, I'm not a big fan of reading beforehand with these things, because as any parent can tell you, nothing prepares you for being a parent, except for having been a parent before. And even that doesn't prepare you, because every child is different. But at least the second time around or the third time around, you know the basics. And since no book will describe your exact situation, oftentimes, unfortunately, I think the only preparation is acknowledging that there will be challenges ahead, making sure you have a strong family structure, that you can people that you can talk to. But in all truth, a lot of it is not something that is done right before the baby is there. It's work that should have been done for years before, because postpartum mental health is just another aspect of men's mental health. And as I mentioned, it's so ignored for most teens and young men, that you can't just flip a switch and suddenly become in touch with your feelings and be willing to talk about that with your spouse. So, I hate to say it, but preparation starts when you're young, because that's what builds you to the point where you're ready for the challenge that is coming to you. I'm sure there are a couple of good books. I don't know of any that I can recommend, other than maybe What to Expect When You're Expecting, although that is more heavily geared towards the mother. It at least educates you on what's going to be happening and what's going to change. And there's also What to Expect Your First Year, which is a good book. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has good books about the baby's first few years. But the reason I don't love them is they're concrete without parenting is nuanced, and every baby is nuanced. And I say this having read these books when my son was born, and getting myself even more crazed that, he wasn't reaching milestones that I knew he wasn't supposed to hit, but I was so out of my mind that I was like, I couldn't be rational. And when you can't be rational, it doesn't matter what you're reading, because you're going to read into it whatever you want. That's why I still think that the most important thing that you can do for any parent is just being honest with them about that this is not going to be all fun and games, and you're going to be sleep deprived. It's not going to be a lot of fun some days. The fun comes later, but you got to put the work in to get to the fun. That's a great question, and it leads to a very important point, which is that if the mother is experiencing postpartum depression, there is a 50% chance that the dad will experience it as well. So it rubs off. If the woman is collapsing and falling apart, there's a very good chance that we will follow suit, which then is catastrophic. We can support our wives by helping, by getting out of our comfort zone and saying, teach me to do these things. Show me how to change the diaper. Show me how to feed. Show me how to give the bath. Like, not pull away from it, but embrace it. That is very, very helpful, because that allows the woman time. And a new mother values those moments that they don't have the baby. They don't always want to admit it, but they do value it, because it can become very overwhelming. It also can help to stop something called maternal gatekeeping, which is where the mother inadvertently criticizes the father to the point where the father now has no confidence and therefore pulls away even further. And it further hurts their self-esteem, which of course can spiral into postpartum anxiety or depression. So, a baby can make a good marriage great, and it can make a bad marriage even worse. So if you have two people that do not communicate, like, it comes down to simple things that are just still so hard. if you can't communicate with one another, a new baby is going to make all of those things much, much worse. If you're good at communicating with each other, it will enhance that. That's why when the baby, if it's in the hospital with the baby that's born, it's acknowledging both parents. It's very subtle, but a lot of nurses in the hospital and also obstetricians often ignore the father. It's making sure that from the very beginning, this is two people, whether it's two fathers, two mothers, or a mother and a father. When they come to follow-up visits, it's saying, it's harder with COVID, unfortunately, but saying to both parents, come to the visits. And it's not just standing there talking to the mother and saying all these things and the father's over here and you're ignoring them. It's making sure that your eye line is going back and forth to both of them. It's if you are the friend or you are the grandparent or you're the aunt or the uncle, it's acknowledging both parents in the room and checking in on both parents. How's it going? Not just to the mother, but asking the father too, how are you doing? All right. Sometimes the simplest questions are all that you need. People think it's some big deal, like, oh my God, what do I say? How do I do it? Talk like you would normally talk. Just ask how everybody's doing. Ask how you can help, whether that's, again, mother to father, father to mother, or grandparent or whatnot. Supporting families.